Janet Yellen was confirmed by the Senate yesterday by a vote of 56 to 26. This was the least Senate support for a Fed chairman in history. Now, the no vote may actually have been higher, but for the weather, which kept a lot of senators from getting back to Washington for the vote. Still, her confirmation was never in doubt. But the policies of the Fed, and particularly those endorsed by Yellen, have been challenged by a lot of critics, especially by our next guest, a lifelong Fed doubter, former congressman, presidential candidate, and the host of Ron Paul Channel, Dr. Ron Paul himself. Dr. Paul, great to see you. You have said that Janet Yellen will be worse than average as a chairman of the Fed. Why do you think that?
Well, mainly because she has spoken out very clearly. Not only does she endorse the principles of the Fed that they all endorse, you know, that they have this magic power to decide what the supply of money should be and what interest rates should be. That's being pretty smart. But she really, really believes in the expansion of money and credit. And she has supported it all the time. I don't quite see her as being the one that's going to unwind all the purchases of these bonds that she has. So what's going to happen is the economy is going to weaken and she's going to back off because she sincerely believes that the Fed's responsibility is always to buy, and keep interest rates low. But where can she go? I mean, at zero, you can't get much lower. So I think she's going to have a dilemma because I don't think we're out of the woods yet.
Well, she and Chairman Bernanke, outgoing Chairman Bernanke, have both claimed credit for some of the positive things that may have happened in their mind with the economy because of what they've been doing. Now, that may be going too far, but how can you say that the economy would be better off if they hadn't done what they were doing? What would have happened to the economy? Certainly the stock market wouldn't have been better off if it hadn't been for bond buying, right?
Well, no, we don't know that. I think that if you would have had permitted the correction and bailed out nobody, 08 and 09 would have been very bad years, worse than they were. And then the bankruptcies would have liquidated the debt and economic growth would have returned. And I think it would be more similar to what happened in 1921. It was one really bad year.
Right.
But this way, we just delay the inevitable. It just lingers on. And I think it's very similar to what we did in the Depression, very similar to what the Japanese have done, that the liquidation, the corrections made, they prop up the mistakes. And that's the biggest thing. Fixing the price of money misleads investors, and then they make mistakes, and they overbuild and underbuild and do all these kind of things because they've ruined the marketplace, and the only market that really seems to thrive on free money is the stock market.
By the way,
and
they are doing a lot of stuff, sort of off-the-record trades, I think about literally trillions of dollars worth, that your son and others, Senator Rand Paul and others, want an accounting for. Ben Bernanke spoke to the issue of accounting. He said that's not necessary because we already have accounting. I think we can play that soundbite and get your reaction to it.
Contrary to what is sometimes asserted, all of the Fed's financial transactions and operations are subject to regular intensive audits by the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, an independent inspector general, and a private accounting firm, as well as by our own internal auditors.
So, Ron Paul, Ben Bernanke is saying we don't need an audit. We're already doing it. What do you say?
Well, he doesn't reassure me because when I asked for more information, I never got it. I think I should have been allowed to go to a FOMC meeting and listen to what they talk about. I'd like to know what they do overseas and how they spent the money. No, that is a very misleading statement that all this is audited. That just is not true, that type of oversight exists. They cling to and they demand this secrecy, and it's going to continue. I don't think they will ever give an audit, a true audit of the Fed as an outside, because they don't want us to know what happens behind the scenes. And I think they'll finally give us a dollar crisis and a severe monetary crisis before we get to know what really
Let's hope that doesn't happen. Meanwhile, Congress is still up to its tricks. The extension of the unemployment insurance. Now, this comes amidst a lot of evidence that, in fact, the unemployment insurance, which has been extended on and on for the past couple of years since that emergency period, which was supposed to be short-lived, evidence that, in fact, it's hurting the job situation. The National Bureau of Economic Research, pretty well-established nonpartisan group, says most of the persistent increase in unemployment during the Great Recession can be accounted for by the unprecedented extensions of unemployment benefit eligibility. And then even President Obama's former chief economist, Alan Krueger, said, quote, job search is inversely related to the generosity of unemployment benefits. So is there any justification for extending these benefits?
Well, from the very beginning, I'd argue the moral case that there isn't. Economic case doesn't exist to give these benefits, and certainly the Constitution doesn't permit it. But we do know a general rule that I believe we can trust, and that is if you subsidize something and support something, you'll get more of it. And I think what you just quoted there is evidence that, if you subsidize unemployment, you remove the incentive to go out and take a job.
Right.
But what they have to compare to is maybe there was a job, but it wasn't as good as the previous job, or it wasn't as good as unemployment benefits, and they would have had to work for much less. So the disincentive not to look for a job is certainly there.
Okay.
But then if you say that, David, you come across as heartless. Don't you really care about people?
That's right. That's right. Harry Potter.
The demagogues are out there.
The producers are going to scream at me. I got to ask you one more question. Bitcoin. A lot of interest in Bitcoin from people who don't like central banks. What does Ron Paul think of Bitcoin, and is it a better substitute for the U.S. dollar?
Well, I don't know enough about it to say that it's a better substitute. I look at it for a political viewpoint and a market viewpoint. I think we ought to have choices, and they ought to be legal. And if people don't commit fraud, there ought to be competition. I want to repeal the legal tender laws. But I'll tell you what, I try to understand it. I understand what a gold coin looks like and feels like, but I can't quite comprehend the
Tough
Bitcoin.
to get your head around Bitcoin.
And therefore, I say I want to just keep it legal. What worries me, though, is that I think Bernanke did not come down hard on it. If it's really, truly an alternative currency, believe me, the Fed and the government's going to come down very hard on an alternative.
Dr. Ron Paul, producers are coming down hard on me because we've taken too much time. Thank you very much. Wonderful to see you again. I appreciate it. Stay warm.
Thanks.
Well,